You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to the Radiance Films Podcast, a show dedicated to all things Radiance Films. I'm your host, Adam Lundy, and I'm here to talk about the most recent announcements as well as last month's releases. You have to forgive me for sounding a little bit sick, because I kind of am. Been under the weather for about a week, which is why this episode is being recorded on Friday the 19th of June, so about a week and a couple of days since the announcements came out. A little bit later than what I would normally put out an episode, a reaction episode like this, but however, kind of put it off long enough that I needed to kind of get back into the swing of things. I didn't want this episode getting pushed out any further, or else I might have been doing a kind of a double upload next month, and I wanted to avoid that because I like to give a bit of dedicated time to talk about the announcements and stuff like that. So we're going to jump straight into those because there's quite a few releases to get through, although there's no box sets per se coming out with the next slate, which is scheduled for release in September. There is quite a few individual releases and a special release as well. I'm going to go in order of the website in terms of how they're posted there. So the first one is a film called The Inugami Family, which, to kind of read you the description from the website, is that when the family patriarch of the Inugami dynasty dies, he leaves his fortune to Tamayo, a young woman from outside the family. There is one condition: she must marry one of his grandsons. As the family gather in a stately mansion to discuss the situation, grisly murders occur. Detective Kasuke Kindaichi arrives to investigate the case and uncovers the secret history of the family's bloodline. Directed by Kani Chikawa, this murder mystery was a massive hit in Japan and profoundly changed the Japanese film industry. Infused with gothic atmosphere and featuring several now iconic scenes, the Inugami Family has rarely been seen outside of its home country, making it one of Japanese cinema's best kept secrets. I'm really looking forward to this one. Kind of ticks a few boxes for what I look for in a film that I would watch more recreationally. I like murder mysteries, I like family dramas, gothicism, stuff with a lot of atmosphere. I'm not super familiar with Kani Chikawa. I've only seen one of his films. I watched relatively recently. I'm going to be covering a few more of his films in a future episode of my other podcast that I launched called Histories of Cinema, which I won't talk too much. I did talk about it in the last episode, but if you want to check out a new podcast that's charting Japanese cinema history, I'll put the link to that in the description. Episode 1 is out now, and episode 2 will be going live this week as well. So if you're wanting to look at a bit more of a kind of a scholarly look into Japanese film history, then Histories of Cinema might be for you. But anyway, back to this. As I said, looking forward to this, especially one that's been not kind of readily available. I think that's one of the main reasons why people like myself and others collect Radiance and are enjoy this company so much, because they are there to put out the gems, the unearthed stuff, the stuff that's been largely unavailable for a long time. And especially when you get someone like a Kani Chikawa, when you can uncover someone like their films and put it out to a wider audience, then that's what we're here for. So that's the Inugami Family. The next film is a film called Corruption, which, again, to read you the blurb from the website. After finishing his studies in Switzerland, the shy and innocent Stefano decides to become a priest. His father, Leonardo, a rich publishing magnate, disapproves. He wants his son to take over his empire someday. When he invites Stefano on a yacht trip together with his mistress, Leonardo's intention is not to reconcile with his son. Pleasure Under the Burning Sun takes on sinister undertones in his haunting tale of a cruel father determined to tempt his son into relinquishing his spiritual ambitions. With ice-cold new wave stylings and sharp dialogue, director Mauro Bolognini, sorry, I'm not great with Italian names, drafts an unsparing critique of Italy's nascent consumerist society. So this one sounds interesting. I'm not familiar with the filmmaker. I don't recall coming across his work or even his name just off the top of my head here. Sounds interesting. The main character is played by Jacques Perrin, who was in Girl with a Suitcase, which obviously came out last year from Radiance. So it'd be cool to see more of him. This one looks interesting. The visuals on the cover, the artwork, look really great. It look kind of like Antonioni-esque, kind of L'Aventura-esque. So looking forward to it. Again, not familiar with the filmmaker, but sounds like it'll be interesting. The next release is a UHD and Blu-ray release, which I don't think either of the others are. Let me just double check. No, this is the only kind of 4K UHD release for this month, which is the Saragossa manuscript. And again, just to kind of read you the blurb from the website. At the height of the Napoleonic Wars, a Polish soldier seeks refuge in a deserted house in the Spanish town of Saragossa and discovers a mysterious manuscript written in a language he doesn't speak. When enemy Spanish officers arrive to arrest him, one of the soldiers realizes that the book appears to tell the story of his grandfather, Alphonse von Worden, and his surreal mystical adventures in the region several decades before. He starts to translate the text for the Polish soldier, and so begins a time-shifting, genre-hopping, Ouroboros-like epic narrative, one that blends gothic, quixotic, and erotic, and in the process interrogates the very nature of storytelling itself. Championed by Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, the Saragossa manuscript has grown in status since its initial release, from a cult oddity to a film widely regarded as one of the greatest ever produced in Poland, and a work that cemented Wojciech Haas as one of European cinema's most visionary and idiosyncratic directors. Sounds really interesting on paper, the actual plot. I've seen some stills from the film, and it looks incredibly interesting. I know it is a bit on the longer side. It's kind of in or around the 3-hour mark, which I guess to tell kind of an epic story is usually needed. As I said, this is a 4K presentation, which is a world premiere of it in 4K UHD. So this is going to be the release to get for this film, at least for the time being. Looking forward to it. I'm, as I've kind of mentioned on this podcast a few times, hard surrealism is sometimes a hard sell for me in terms of just engaging with the content. So I'm a little bit kind of trepidatious about it. But like everything, I'll go in with an open mind, and when we get to that stage in September, I'll be able to give you my honest thoughts on it. Sounds interesting on paper. We'll wait and see how much I personally enjoy it, and I can give my feedback then in a few months' time. The last of the kind of standard releases, I guess we'll call them, is a Blu-ray release for a film called New Rose Hotel, which, to give you the blurb, Abel Ferreira directs cyberpunk pioneer William Gibson's neo-noir short story about industrial espionage. Two extraction specialists, Fox and X, which are played by Christopher Walken and Willem Dafoe, are hired to tempt the genius Hiroshi away from a rival company by using sexy call girl Sandy, played by Asia Argento. Featuring a variety of screens and footage, New Rose Hotel uses these mixed media formats to distance us from Hiroshi as an intraceable presence that emphasizes the lack of control experienced by Fox and X, while also presenting a prescient view of our own engagement with screens and digital communication. Misunderstood upon release, Ferreira's feverish film has been reappraised in recent years and compared to David Lynch's exploration of perception and paranoia. Newly restored and making its UK home video debut, New Rose Hotel is one of the finest examples of cyberpunk on film. Another film which, on paper sounds really interesting. Obviously has a lot of interesting names attached to it, with it being a Ferreira film featuring Walken and Willem Dafoe. Asia Argento obviously has her own kind of controversy that I'm not going to dive into here, at least. But on paper sounds interesting. Artwork is not really for me. I don't really like the font and stuff. Obviously could completely change when I see the film, and maybe it'll make more sense, and maybe it'll be a bit, it will match the tone of the film, because as you can probably guess, I haven't seen this one before. So interested to see how it is. There's obviously a few special features on here with Ferreira, with Argento, with Willem Dafoe. There's some audio commentary and stuff like that included, so plenty of special features. Another one that I'm kind of on the fence about, we'll wait and see. I'll go in with an open mind. And then the release that I'm most excited for, I think this is the real gem of the slate, is Treasures from the Gulistan Film Studio. So it is a collection of Iranian cinema. I'll read you the blurbs, it'll do it better justice than I possibly could. So for the first time ever on home video, this collection presents the complete output of the iconoclastic independent Iranian film studio founded in the late 1950s by the towering figure of Iranian culture, Ebrahim Golestan. The studio's earliest productions were documentaries that helped bring Iranian cinema to international attention, including The House is Black, directed by poet Farrukhzad. From 1961, the studio turned to fiction. 2 feature films were completed, including the pivotal Brick and Mirror, both of which are presented here. After years of circulation in compromised versions, sometimes altered by censorship, these classics, which map the origins of the Iranian New Wave, are now presented in restored and definitive versions. The 9 films in this set move fluidly from prose poetry to political allegory, achieving remarkable results that have inspired generations of filmmakers from Abbas Kiarostami to Jonathan Glazer. As I said, this is the real gem of the set for me. I'm a massive fan of Abbas Kiarostami and have always been interested in Iranian cinema. I've actually already seen The House is Black. I watched that a few years ago. If I remember correctly, it was included on a Sight and Sound list. Maybe not the most recent one, maybe the one prior to that, and that's what kind of put it on my radar. So I watched that a few years ago and thought it was phenomenal. So being able to watch more films from this era, as kind of Iranian cinema was becoming an actual force and becoming a kind of a supported art form within Iranian culture, has me really excited. So I think this set is going to be the pick of the bunch for me. It has a ton of special features as well. I'll just kind of breeze through them. So there's new 4K restorations of Brick and Mirror from the original camera negative by the Cineteca de Bologna and Ekran Noir Productions, Fayadun Farouz under the supervision of Ebrahim Golestan. There's an outtake from Brick and Mirror, introduction by curator and the Golestan Restoration Project collaborator Ehsan Koshbakt. There's a visual essay on Ibrahim Golestan by Koshbakt. A restored program of 3 short documentaries combining the talents of master director Golestan and Iran's greatest female modernist poet Farrukhzad, which is A Fire, Courtship, and The House is Black. A restored program of Golestan's documentaries following his recurrent theme of the land and its people, which is the crown jewel of Iran, Wave, Coral and Rock, The Hills of Marlik, and Harvest and Seed. Introductions to each program by Ehsan Koshbakt. A new 4K restoration of Secrets of the Jin Valley Treasure from the original camera negative. Introduction of that film by Ehsan Koshbakt. See You Friday Robinson, which is Micha Farahani's award-winning documentary chronicles an exchange of ideas between 2 giants of cinema, Golestan and Jean-Luc Godard, on the meaning of creativity in the twilight of life. And then there's also a booklet featuring archival writing by Ehsan Koshbakt. So tons of stuff on here. In terms, obviously, multiple features, multiple documentaries, shorts, introductions, interviews, etc. Full to the brim. I actually think it's pretty good value for what you're getting. Just kind of in that kind of mid £30 mark. Obviously, give or take in terms of your currency. So I think it's pretty good value for what you're getting. The artwork looks really nice. Obviously, there's been a lot of love put into this release. I really can't understate. I'm so excited for this release to kind of really get into this stuff with them. Abbas Kiarostami is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. I've seen some other Iranian films here and there, but haven't been able to do a deep dive in this era of stuff apart from The House is Black. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on this set and going through it all. The last kind of announcement is a transmission release of a film called Joe, which, again, to kind of read the blurb here, is after his daughter, which is Susan Sarandon in her first screen role, overdoses on heroin, wealthy New York businessman Bill Compton, played by Dennis Patrick, confronts her drug dealer boyfriend in a rage and accidentally murders him. Stunned, he retreats to a nearby bar and finds himself confessing his crime to a stranger, the charismatic yet deeply bigoted blue-collar factory worker Joe. When the hippie-hating Joe discovers his new friend is telling the truth, he begins to ingratiate himself into Compton's life, and despite their vastly different backgrounds, the two men find themselves developing a rapport based around their shared fear and disdain for the counterculture, an uneasy alliance that will eventually have devastating consequences. So it's directed by John G. Avildsen. From a typically trenchant Norman Wexler screenplay, Joe ruthlessly exposes the dark heart of American society in a shocking, darkly satirical depiction of the fierce cultural battleground of the USA at the beginning of the 1970s and the violent death of the hippie dream. Sounds interesting. I don't think I'd heard of the film. From reading the blurb, it's perhaps mentioned in Quentin Tarantino's book. It seems like the kind of film that Quentin Tarantino might have talked about in his book, Cinema Speculation. So there's something maybe tickling the back of my brain there that he may have mentioned it, but I've definitely never seen it. Probably be a transmission release that I do pick up, as I've kind of mentioned a few times in this podcast. I'm not going to be covering every single transmission release. They're kind of more so ones I'm going to pick up as I like. I'll probably end up picking up this one. Seems like something that I'll find interesting. So those are the releases that are all coming out in September. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid slate. There's a couple on here that I'm not sure of myself, but I know are highly regarded by other people. The Saragossa manuscript in particular, obviously, is pretty highly regarded. I just don't know how I'll like it personally, but I've been surprised before plenty of times watching Radiance Films, so I'm hoping it'll be another one of those situations. But the standouts for me, the ones that I really am looking forward to getting into, definitely the Inugami family and the Iranian cinema set. Those are the two that are going to be first out the box, first off the shelf, straight into the player, and diving into. So let's get into the films that came out in May. So I'm going to run through these by order of spine, because that's just the way I took them off my shelf. So I'm gonna there was no box sets this time around. They're all just kind of singular releases to a degree. There's one double feature, which we'll get to. Mainly all singular releases, no box sets. And before I kind of go into my individual thoughts, I'd say this was a solid month. I got something out of all the films that I'm going to talk about here today. None of them are going to enter my top 10 anytime soon or anything like that, but I think this was a really solid slate. So I'm going to start off with the Brian DePalma release, which was for Hi Mom. I'll read the blurb just from the inside on the OBI strip, which is an aspiring adult filmmaker played by Robert De Niro. Sarah, I can't read that word. He joins his neighbors, films his neighbors, joins a militant black theater group, and turns his camera on the countercultural scene in 1970 New York in an attempt to find meaning and inspiration on returning from Vietnam. A hilariously madcap comedy that has still retained its outrageous power to shock. Hi Mom is a vital work of the early new Hollywood and a key film in the career of master director Brian DePalma. It definitely shocked me, so I'll get into this a little bit. It's an interesting film. It's kind of like 3 short films that all happen to feature Robert De Niro playing this character. But his character is kind of different in each section, even though the character itself is consistent. He's playing the same guy, and it's somewhat of a through line from kind of start to finish in terms of where he starts and where he ends up. The 3 segments that I'm going to call them segments at least are so kind of widely different, both stylistically and in tone, that you could almost look at this as kind of 3 interconnected short films that just happens to feature Robert De Niro playing a consistent character. So the film starts off with, as the film describes, so Robert De Niro's character, who is reprising his role from an earlier student film that they made together. And that film ends with Robert De Niro's character getting drafted. So this one begins with him now returned from Vietnam, and he's trying to break into the adult film industry. And he comes up with this crazy concept where he sets up a camera in his apartment block, points it through the window of the apartment block across the road to basically record couples having sex, and then use that as pornography. So he decides to kind of create this scheme where he gets to know a girl across in the other building, and set it up so that his camera will capture them having sex, and then he can sell that as pornography. And the film kind of goes through that, and we start to see their kind of burgeoning relationship, and they actually have a really good rapport, and they're getting on well. And at the same time, he decides to sign up to be part of this kind of militant, kind of Black Panther adjacent theater group that's also kind of hanging around the building and stuff like that. And that's when the film kind of pivots stylistically and in terms of the tone, because up until now it was just kind of like a weird sex comedy. The whole sequence involving the theater group is honestly one of the most disturbing and scared I've actually ever been watching a film, at least in years. And it sounds weird, but like, it was terrifying. So it's shot in a style that I can only really compare to something like, it's so ahead of its time. It was almost something like, you know, low fidelity, like found footage, you know, like Blair Witch style, you know, just going around handheld camera shoved in people's faces. Some really harrowing stuff. I'm not going to really get into too much explicit detail because I don't want to spoil anything. A lot of harrowing stuff kind of happening with this, you know, this theater experience that's being put on by this group. And I remember sitting back and I'm like, Jesus, what am I watching? This is horrifying. And it's no surprise DePalma obviously then moved kind of into a horror realm or a thriller realm somewhat. And like, because yeah, that the entire, if you've seen the film, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the film, strap in, because the whole middle sequence involving the militant theater group putting on this theatrical experience. It's not a play. I can't really call it a play. It's just kind of like an experience, an interactive experience. It's terrifying, and it makes you really think about like society and stuff like that. And again, I don't want to get into too much spoiler territory because I feel like it would take something out of it if I talk too much about what it's all about. But it's really hard hitting stuff. And then we have a final sequence where, kind of empowered by this experience, Robert De Niro's character decides to become a revolutionary, an anarchist himself. And the film kind of ends in a funny way that I won't get into spoiler territory. So it's a really interesting film because each section is almost so different from one another. I found it a little bit hard to kind of engage with it as an entire piece of work, you know, as one singular film. I kind of think of it in sections, and if I try and think of it as one singular film and judge it as one singular film, I actually don't think it works as a singular film, just because I don't feel like the sections really cohesively sit together. It is very kind of studenty in that they had a few different ideas, but not enough to make a full feature out of. So let's just put it all together, and we'll try and string them together in a cohesive way. I didn't find it that cohesive. I found it a little bit tonally jarring in places. So it doesn't work for me massively as an entire feature. I think there's 3 individual short films that feature the same kind of recurring character. I like it a lot more thinking of it that way, especially the middle section with the militant theatrical group. Terrifying and relevant and sad, and darkly funny to a degree. Hi Mom, Brian De Palma. If you're a Brian De Palma fan, it's obviously a must-have. I had never seen it before, and I consider myself a De Palma fan. Very different, you know, from Hitchcockian thrillers that he would be known for. Although, to be fair, some of the shot setup of the buildings and stuff during the voyeuristic scenes are very rear window coded, I guess. So there's always some Hitchcock in there somewhere. But very different from what would, you know, he'd become known for in the kind of late 70s and into the 80s. So maybe don't expect that. One final note actually on it. It didn't take me out of it per se. I just found it really jarring. It was really weird to hear Robert De Niro not talk with like an Italian American accent. he talks like a yuppie. I was sitting back going, like, it's almost like he's talking like Patrick Bateman. It, like, just the way he talks just really reminded me of the way Christian Bale talks in American Psycho. So I thought that was very funny, and I found it a little bit jarring at first to hear Robert De Niro talk in this kind of weird yuppie-ish accent rather than his kind of typical gruff Italian American, typical kind of New Yorker accent. Yeah, Hi Mom, very, very interesting film, even if I didn't like love it. Next one we have then is a film by Sado Nakajima called Aesthetics of a Bullet, which, just before we get into the nitty gritty of the film, Aesthetics of a Bullet has to be one of the coolest names for a film ever. Like, Aesthetics of a Bullet, it just hits. It's one of the most hard hitting, cold titles that I've ever come across. So 10 out of 10. I should have really looked it up. I didn't know if that was an exact translation of the Japanese title or if that was kind of made up to kind of give a similar vibe. But kudos to whoever came up with the title of Aesthetics of a Bullet, because it goes insanely hard. To the film itself, again, to read you the blurb from the OBI strip. The Yakuza gang selects a good-for-nothing street vendor to stir up trouble in enemy territory. With a flashy suit and a gun and a pocket full of money, he feels like a king, but soon realizes that waving a gun and pulling the trigger are two very different things. After the major studios refused to finance it, director Sado Nakajima took his project to New Wave Bastion ATG, with a deeply impressive performance by Tsunehiko Watase that predates De Niro's indelible turn as Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver by 3 years. Aesthetics of a Bullet is a lost gem of 1970s Japanese cinema. So Sado Nakajima, obviously not the first film that he's had as part of the Radiance release. Most recently, we had the Japanese Godfather trilogy, which I adore, and I'll say it again. I said it enough when I recorded that episode, but I will say it again. The Japanese Godfather trilogy are phenomenal films, and would highly recommend picking it up if it's still available. I haven't checked. If it's still available, I highly recommend picking it up. They are incredible. And I also really enjoyed the Rapacious Jailbreaker that came out last year. Aesthetics of a Bullet was a bit of a disappointment on the back of that. Technically, it's all very good. I don't really have too much, to say from a technical point of view. It's a solid 70s Japanese new wave crime film. It doesn't reinvent any wheels from that perspective. It just looks good. It's stylish. It's quick. It does what you expect it to do from that perspective. What really made me struggle with the film, and this is probably, it's doing what it says on the tin. But it was a real struggle for me, was just the main character is just such an asshole, and not like a lovable kind of rogue anti-hero. He's just a loser. I just found him so annoying to have to spend an entire film with this guy who is a loser, annoying, and just an utter scumbag to women for no reason at all. So yeah, that was my main issue with this film. I found it very hard to care about what was happening because the main character just annoyed me so much. It took me out of it to a degree. It's possible I would like it more on rewatch, kind of knowing now to expect this character to be frustrating. So it's one I'll have to revisit down the line. But I'll just throw that out as a caveat that the main character he's a lot to deal with from that perspective. And if you get easily annoyed at characters like this, even though it's deliberate, it's not like he's a bad written character. It's all deliberate. It's just not for me personally. Yeah, so Aesthetics of a Bullet, the start of the film is really good. The last act is really good. There's some solid stuff in there. It's just dealing with the entire middle of the film, where we are left to just follow this guy. It wasn't for me, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm a bit disappointed by Aesthetics of a Bullet because the artwork is incredible. Big respect to Nakajima as a filmmaker. I'd love to see more of his work. This definitely hasn't turned me off him as a filmmaker. I'm hoping that Radiance do get around to showing more of his stuff down the line. Yeah, Aesthetics of a Bullet was a bit of a miss for me, unfortunately. Next, we're on to the double feature that came out this in May, which is Jean Le Pucelle, or Joan the Maid, as I'm going to say, because I still don't know if I'm pronouncing the French title correctly. I'm going to call it Joan the Maid. So this is a part 1 and part 2. So Les Batailles and then Les Prisons, which is the battles and the prisons. Those are the kind of 2 subtitles. I'll read you the blurb, but I think we all know the story of Joan of Arc at this stage, but I'll read the blurb anyway. 15th century France, tasked by saints to help free her country from the English, a young peasant girl leaves her humble home to meet the heir to the French throne, determined to lead his troops into battle. She ends the siege in the city of Orléans, but is injured and then captured by the enemy, who put her fate on trial. The legend of Joan of Arc comes to vivid life in this grounded retelling by Jacques Rivette, a moving 2-part portrait starring the magnetic Sandrine Bonnier. And Bonnier is fantastic in this film. She puts in a real powerhouse performance as Joan of Arc. I'll kind of get the stuff out of the way, the important stuff. This is a very much a marathon rather than a sprint. It should go without saying that Jacques Rivette likes to take his time when it comes to telling his stories and getting his points across, and this is no different. Altogether, you're looking at about 6 hours worth of content between the 2 films, so there's a lot, and it is slow cinema. There's not tons of epic battles and fight scenes and stuff like that. A lot of it is characters talking and ruminating and thinking and planning. And there's nothing wrong with that. I actually quite enjoyed both of these films. They're very good looking. They're really, really good looking films. They're not as kind of whimsical as some of Rivette's other films in terms of how they're shot. There's not like any dreamy stuff going on or quick cuts or anything kind of any way new wave adjacent. If I was to liken it stylistically to anything, it's very Tarkovsky-esque. There's a lot of shots in here that are like similar to what you'd see in Andrei Rublev if Andrei Rublev was shot in color rather than black and white, obviously. So there was a lot of Tarkovsky in here with the way the camera moves, with the kind of slow and deliberate takes, well planned out. The costumes and the set design are all very, very, very good. So I don't really have anything negative per se to say about it, other than, like I said, it is just it's a lot to take on. I watched them over 2 days. I didn't sit down and watch it all in one go. I watched it over the course of 2 days, and maybe that helped me enjoy them a little bit more. I think sitting down for 6 hours to watch it would become a bit of a struggle. But if you're into slow cinema, then this would definitely be no struggle for you. And by slow cinema standards, it moves pretty quickly from a plot point of view. We do move quite a bit through the story of Joan of Arc. We don't really hang around too much. And one thing I really liked about it as well is how it treats the idea of divinity and divine intervention, and this whole idea of Joan of Arc kind of having this open communication with God. We never see any of this. It's all very hidden. It's all very implied. It leaves the question open to the audience as to whether, are you do you believe that Joan of Arc was a saint and she communicated with God, or is this just a young girl with some mental illness, and it kind of spiraled from there. So it lets you make that decision. It doesn't force you to believe that Joan of Arc did or did not speak to God. It really leaves it up to you as the audience members, and I appreciate that. I appreciate Rivette letting me do my own thinking and making my own decisions for me. The only other thing I'll say as well, if you are maybe wary of blind buying a 6-hour historical epic, and you happen to be a subscriber to the Criterion channel, they are streaming on there as well. If you wanted to try before you buy, or at least maybe watch the first part before you buy, that's always an option if you're a subscriber there. It's possible it's streaming elsewhere, but I have a Criterion channel subscription, and I noticed when I was logging this on Letterboxd, I'm a Letterboxd Pro user, so it told me it tells me what subscription services it's available on if I have them. And it came up that it was on the Criterion channel, and I double checked then later on, and they are on the Criterion channel if you did want to try before you buy and you happen to be a subscriber. Then that's always an option. So Joan the Maid, certainly not a film I'd recommend to everyone, but if you're into slow cinema, if you like really kind of deliberate, beautiful cinematography and costume design, stuff like that, will definitely be up your alley. I don't see people who like that stuff having a problem with this film. Very enjoyable watch from that perspective. And speaking of enjoyable watches, we'll talk about the last film from this slate, which is Le Professionnel, starring the legendary Jean-Paul Belmondo, one of my all-time favorite actors. This is directed by a guy called Georges Lautner, who I've never seen any of his other films, but if they're all like this, I'll need to seek them out, because this is a very good palate cleanser for the kind of slow historical epic of Joan the Maid. Le Professionnel is just an all-action kind of action thriller, not really a mystery or anything. It's if I was to compare it to anything, and I was kind of thinking about this at the start, the way the film sets itself up, and I'll read the blurb in a second. It's almost like a kind of a Mission Impossible film. It's that kind of style of an action thriller, where we're following this charismatic lead character as he tries to complete this impossible mission that he's been set on. So to read you the blurb from the OBI strip. When his orders to kill an African president change at the last minute, French secret agent Jos Beaumont isn't recalled but betrayed by his superiors, who denounce him as an assassin. After 2 years in jail, Jos escapes to his homeland with vengeance on his mind, determined to carry out his original mission. This French classic marked a high point in Belmondo's action career. His spectacular stunts and brawny charm, underlined by Ennio Morricone's iconic theme, Chai Mei. And you'll get used to that theme because they play it every fucking 10 seconds in this film. It'll be stuck in your head for weeks afterwards. I really enjoyed this film. It's just like turn your brain off fun. The whole kind of disavowed by his country stuff, that's very Mission Impossible-y to me. Belmondo, like I said before, he's one of my favorite actors. I'd never seen him in this kind of a role. I'd only ever really seen him in French New Wave stuff, Godard and Truffaut, where he's almost like in terms of like his looks and his charm, he's like the idea of like a perfect American style hero, but he just has this kind of underlying goofiness to him that kind of goes against that in a way. It subverts the expectations you have of him, because you see him as like, this is a good looking guy, he's charismatic, he's charming, but he's just so like, he's just kind of goofy in the way he moves. He's very limmy, and he's very physical, and that kind of cuts that a little bit. So I was kind of, I wouldn't say worried, but I was kind of wondering how that was going to translate to a more atypical action role. But luckily he still has that kind of physicality, that kind of whimsical charm about him. That still makes him Belmondo. So he's, even though he's not playing a kind of a sad sack loser, loner, whatever kind of character who would sometimes play for Godard specifically, even though he is playing a typical action hero, there's still something quite funny about his physicality. He still has that charm about him as well. So I really enjoyed him in this role. I didn't know he even had an action career. I never really explored anything after the French New Wave. So I'm going to seek out more stuff by Lautner and more of Belmondo's action films. Because it's just a good time. There's not really, I don't want to say there's not much going on under the surface here, but it's just a good time. It's just a fun action film. In terms of like the plot itself, if you wanted to compare it maybe to an already released Radiance film, it's somewhat similar to Goodbye and Amen, because it has that kind of similar plot point. But this one was much more of a straight good time. even though it does have these kind of weird moments of just French quirkiness where we're like, we'll just have like some sexual violence in here for 10 seconds because we're French, we'll do that. It's very subdued by normal standards. But it's still just in there randomly. It kind of takes you out a little bit, but then we get back to the fun stuff and it's like, okay, fair enough, we'll just move past that now. We'll go back to Belmondo jumping around an apartment trying to evade cops. Yeah, The Professional, it's just a good time. If you just, it's in a way, it's almost not like a typical Radiance release in the perspective where it is just a straight action film. If it was American, it would probably be put out by the transmission side of things rather than Radiance. But obviously it's French, so we'll keep it in the Radiance side of things. So it doesn't necessarily fit the rest of the catalog, but I think that's a good thing. It's nice to have some variety in the types of films that Radiance put out. They do that anyway, but when we get just a straight fun film, just a straight action thriller, you know, it's nice to have that every now and again as a palate cleanser when you've been watching stuff like Joan the Maid and Aesthetics of a Bullet. It's nice to have something like this to just turn on and just turn your brain off and laugh and smile. So that is that. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, I was going to talk about it a little bit more in a bit more detail. So I started a new podcast recently, and it's going to be running alongside the Radiance Films Podcast. It's not going to, take over it or anything like that. It's called Histories of Cinema. The links for everything will be in the description. I'm hosting it with my good friend Chris Haskell, who's been on this podcast a couple of times. We used to do a podcast together called They Live by Film. The idea of Histories of Cinema is that it's seasonal, so every season we're going to cover a new country, movement, or genre and just track the history of it. So we started with Japan. So episode 1 is already out, where we covered early silent Japanese cinema. So from the literal kind of first days of Japanese cinema all the way through to, moving it from the stage and kabuki to being a more modern art form. So that's what we cover in the first episode. We have a new episode coming out that, if you're listening to this today, when I put this up on Friday, it won't be out. But if you're listening to this, kind of from Sunday the 21st of June onwards, episode 2 will be out, where we're covering the transition to sound cinema in the 1930s. We talk a little bit about why it was late moving to sound, who the kind of major filmmakers were of that era, what were the types of films that were getting made, new styles that were getting developed, etc. So that episode will be coming out. We're going to be recording it on Saturday the 20th, so I'm hoping it'll be live by the kind of 21st, or worst case scenario, Monday the 22nd. So if you want to move over and kind of keep listening to me talk, not about Radiant stuff, but kind of more from a scholarly perspective, talking about the history of cinema, then please check out that podcast. I'd really recommend it. You can follow us on Instagram and stuff. We also have a free Substack where we're posting articles about some of the stuff that we're talking about as well. So all the links for that are down below in the description. I'll be back in a few weeks to talk about the June releases, which just came in. And to give you a teaser, I watched Solo earlier today and thought it was really great. So we're already off to a good start with the June releases. So I'll be back in a few weeks to talk about the rest of those, along with whatever gets announced for October, which will hopefully be some horror. So that's that. Take care, and I'll catch you in a few weeks.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
Greetings, welcome to Two in the Pinku Podcast. Experience a deep dive into softcore Japanese sexploitation cinema from the 60s up into the present, with an emphasis on sleaze and seduction. We are monthly or bi-weekly, and we're not even bi.
Will pink film save our marriage? Find out on Two in the Pinku Podcast.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 Podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 Podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 Podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters, and Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface-level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind-the-scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
Okay. I'm ready. Welcome to Split Your Head, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by me, Bob, that covers the gamut of all things horror, exploitation, cult, underground, experimental, transgressive, bizarre, and indie. I've been fortunate enough to connect with some of the most groundbreaking and upcoming filmmakers, writers, and artists. Don't expect a typical interview. I love shooting the shit with my guests and stumbling on surprising topics that'll literally split our heads. From splatter comedies to nihilistic sleaze, uncomfortable art house to genre classics. If it gets my brain buzzing and cracking wide open like a watermelon full of blood, then I would like to share it with your ears. Now a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network. Hi, Mom.